The Afghan government and the US are in secret talks with the Taliban, reveals President Hamid Karzai, saying the group is seeking peace. Just what are these talks about, and could they result in a real peace in this war-torn country? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the programme. I'm Adrian Finnegan. The US and Afghanistan have been holding secret three-way talks with the Taliban. That's according to the Afghan President Hamid Karzai, who told the Wall Street Journal in an interview, and I quote, "There have been contacts between the US government and the Taliban, there have been contacts between the Afghan government and the Taliban, and there have been some contacts that we have made, all of us together, including the Taliban." Now, it serves as a step towards ending the decade-long war that the US and its allies have been embroiled in since right after 9/11. The Taliban had previously been against holding talks with the US-backed Afghan government. The group's been one of the biggest obstacles to peace in the country. It had joined forces with al-Qaeda leader Osama bin Laden to fight the West, but with bin Laden on the run and then finally killed by an American force last May, engaging the Taliban to end the conflict has become a more viable option. Well, Mr. Karzai is now in Islamabad for regional talks with Pakistan and Iran. During a meeting on Thursday, President Karzai and the Pakistani President Asif Ali Zardari discussed the reconciliation process within Afghanistan among a host of other issues. Tensions between the two countries have often been sparked by cross-border attacks. Karzai had used the killing of the al-Qaeda leader bin Laden not far from the Pakistan capital to point fingers at his neighbour, saying that Islamabad wasn't doing enough to help with counter-terrorism efforts. And Pakistan has complained of being sidestepped after talks between Afghanistan and the United States in Qatar. But for more on the recent three-way talks, Bernard Smith has this exclusive report from Afghanistan.
In Kunar province, along Afghanistan's border with Pakistan, the Taliban calls the shots. These fighters are proud of their links with al-Qaeda. If the US talks with the Taliban are to have any hope of success, the Taliban leadership will need to bring these men on board.
We are neither for nor against these talks in Qatar. But the Prophet Muhammad tells us not to accept our leaders' orders when they're against Islam. If our leaders makes a deal that is against Allah, we don't accept it. If our leaders stands against Allah, we'll have to stand against our leaders.
Kunar has been one of the deadliest provinces for NATO forces in Afghanistan. These Taliban fighters believe they're taking part in the talks from a position of strength. They won't accept Afghanistan's constitution and want a country governed solely by Islamic or Sharia law.
The Americans didn't want negotiations with us before. Now they want to talk to us. Negotiating is part of our duty, as is fighting. We have shown to the world that we can do both. The foreigners have suffered a lot of casualties here. That's what's persuaded them to talk. They've been shamed in front of the whole world. This is one of our successes.
But the Taliban has also suffered heavy losses, so its leadership may be weighing up its options. Ismail Qasimyar is a member of Afghanistan's High Peace Council. It's responsible for bringing a political end to the war here.
I think through strength and through military actions, this game is not going to be ended. So the only end game would come through the door of peace and reconciliation.
The Taliban fighters are said to be united behind their leader, Mullah Omar. These talks could test the strength of that unity like never before. If the current Taliban leadership is seen as giving way on issues like the constitution, the presence of foreign troops here and the imposition of Sharia law, then there's a risk that a new hardline Taliban leader could emerge and some of those foot soldiers will fall in behind him. Bernard Smith, Al Jazeera, Kabul.
So, could these talks lead to a real peace in Afghanistan? To discuss this issue, we're joined by our guests today in Kabul, Waheed Omer, a former spokesperson to the Afghan president and political activist. In Islamabad, Syed Tariq Pirzada, a political analyst and columnist for Frontier Post. And in London, Aminullah Habibi, a research fellow at the UK Defence Academy. Gentlemen, welcome to you all. Waheed Omer in Kabul, we'll start with you. Hamid Karzai insists that most Taliban are, quote, definitively interested in a peace settlement. Is he right?
Well, I don't think we can make that judgment as yet, because so far the official reaction from the Taliban has been that of trying to buy time and trying to trying to leverage their position over the Americans and the Afghan government. It's hard to make that judgment, but if the president has that knowledge that they are interested, let us see as to how that's going to happen.
Syed Tariq Pirzada, how much control does Pakistan exert over the Taliban? Has that control prevented the Taliban entering talks before now? And if so, what's changed?
Well, let me put it this way. On the 4th of January, the government of Pakistan, through its foreign ministry, actually welcomed the opening round of the negotiations between Taliban and the United States in Doha. So Islamabad actually welcomed that process and the beginning of that. However, as far as the influence of Pakistan on the Taliban is concerned, well, you know, it goes way back. Even before 1996, when Taliban were not in power. These are those fellows who were at that time peaceful, and they did get education from schools in the northwestern frontier province of Pakistan, now called Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. And over a period of time, when they came to power, the Taliban, they were recognized by 3 countries, and Pakistan was one of them. So the relations are old, deep-rooted. However, now we know that Pakistan is not the only country. The United States, as we know, what Joe Biden said a few weeks ago, that the Taliban are not the enemy of the United States. So we saw the liaison office open in Qatar, and then we had the news of some contacts between Taliban and the United States and Germany. And the Doha round of talks is going on, and we have right now actually the news about 2-3 proposals. Although they have not reached any settlement, it's far from the settlement, but Pakistan's influence is clear, Pakistan's backing is clear, Pakistan is a neighboring country, the Taliban are Pashtuns, half of them, 60% of the Afghan population is Pashtun population. It straddles on both sides of the border. So Pakistan has a vested interest, Pakistan has a natural interest, historical interest, and of course Taliban have had a long-time relationship with Pakistan.
Aminullah Habibi in London, many people, both Afghan and those involved with the international coalition, fear that the Taliban are insincere about seeking a political deal and have only talked about opening an office in the Gulf to raise funds and prestige, or to buy time ahead of the 2014 withdrawal. Are they right?
I think the Taliban can be sincere if they are let alone and if they are independent to take their decisions. I just wanted to disagree with my colleague in Pakistan to say that Pakistan has welcomed and helped the Qatar office. It was actually Pakistan was under pressure to cooperate on that, and there are lots of resentments in Pakistan to see that the Taliban is going out of their control. The Taliban, the Afghan Taliban, are willing to talk. I don't think if they have any hostility forever with the Afghan government or with the Afghan people, they want to talk. But the problem is that our neighboring countries, especially Pakistan, try to control them, to monopolize, to have a grip on controlling the Taliban and not to let them to talk to the Afghan government. We've had lots of examples that the Taliban who wanted to talk to the Afghan government, they were arrested. Mullah brother was the second person in Taliban, was one of the examples. Mullah Ubaidullah was killed. In fact, there was news that he was tortured and killed in prison. And we have lots of other examples that the Taliban, who wanted to talk to the Afghan government directly and independently, they were controlled by Pakistan and they were stopped. And the fact that we have an office, seeing an office open in Qatar, means that to take the Taliban out of the control of Pakistan and let them engage in peace talks independently. And I think the Afghan Taliban are willing to talk if Pakistan is put under pressure to cooperate in that. And if the Pakistani services are not put under pressure, I don't think if the talk will go ahead and can get anywhere, because as soon as we currently, for example, the Mullah Omer branch is talking and engaged in this talk in Qatar, and we have lots of other branches that are there. And if Pakistan is not happy with that, and if they see that the Mullah Omer branch is getting independent and do not obey the orders of Pakistan, they will help the other groups to come back and start the fight again.
Okay, Waheed Omer in Kabul, I could see you also shaking your head there when Syed Tariq Pirzada was talking.
Yes, I was just trying to say that we need to avoid making going into discussions of who is how many percent in Afghanistan and why should Pakistan be supporting Taliban because they are representing a certain ethnic group. Those are divisive discussions, debates, and Pakistan has tried to raise that kind of issues in the past, and it has not helped. And so far as the position of Pakistan and of that of the United States is concerned, I know that Joe Biden has made an announcement that the Taliban are not enemies of the United States, but the way Pakistan deals with them is it's way beyond only being a friend. They are actively actually supporting an insurgency. They are actively supporting a terrorist activity within the borders of their neighbors. So I would not balance the kind of stance that the United States has and that the Pakistan has against the Taliban.
Syed Tariq Pirzada, then in Islamabad, give us your view on the nature, the true nature of the relationship between the Taliban and Pakistan. Mr. Karzai enjoys pretty good relations with Pakistan's politicians. Why does he not enjoy the same with Pakistan's military top brass?
As a matter of fact, until at the time when Burhanuddin Rabbani, the head of the Peace Council, was assassinated, until that time we saw a blossoming of relationship between Afghanistan and Pakistan. Suddenly his assassination happened, and here we saw Mr. Karzai jumping on Pakistan as though his assassination was staged by Pakistan, and then we saw Washington jumping on Pakistan. But remember one thing. After all is said and done, Pakistan is the neighboring state of Afghanistan, a brotherly, historical and brotherly relationship of centuries. They are going to coexist in the region. It is in the very interest of Pakistan to have a peaceful Afghanistan through which gas pipelines, economic relationship can flourish, and Pakistan can benefit. Similarly, Afghanistan can benefit through transit trade right down to the Arabian Sea. So there is no single argument that can be used to make the point that it is not in the interest of Pakistan to support the peace process in Afghanistan. Look, Adrian, here is the fact. Pakistan does support Afghanistan out of the way by going even out of the way. They have Pakistan has become the victim of the war against terrorism started by the United States. I mean, consider a situation. You know, if you look at the border between Mexico and United States, where would the Mexican people go if the bombing starts across the border? The people would come inside Pakistan. So did Taliban came into Pakistan. And of course, this is a common area, historically, legally, otherwise, traditionally, conventionally. So Pakistan, and number two, I do want to make a point. Afghans are Afghans, very proud people. there is a limit to which Pakistan can facilitate the process, can convince them to follow some peace process that suits them and expedite that. But Afghans are so proud of their tradition that they cannot be forcefully, they cannot be coerced into accepting any position.
All right, I don't want to get too bogged down in the Pakistan issue here, but Aminullah Habibi, just quickly a point from you before we move on.
Well, I just wanted to say that I think Afghans can make peace if they're let alone. The problem is that the politics in our region is quite complex, and our regional neighbors, I'm afraid, they do not accept the independence of Afghanistan and the independence of an Afghan state, and they try to control Kabul from Islamabad, and that's the problem. And the second point I wanted to make is that, which is a long-term problem, is the military security mentality running Pakistan, and I think it does not serve the Pakistani people itself. Look at the Indians. India is thriving and developing in terms of economy because the mentality is not military oriented. But in Pakistan, I'm afraid the military mentality is running this country, and that affects spillover in Afghanistan. And they see from that military and security angle towards Afghanistan to control Afghanistan. The problem is that if we do not solve this, if this problem is not solved, I think the problem will be a long-term problem in the region.
All right, gentlemen, I just want to move the focus of our conversation for just a moment. In January, President Obama reiterated NATO's planned withdrawal by 2014 and announced that the US was holding discussions with the Taliban. Now, a number of US officials say their country wants to accelerate its fragile talks with the Taliban so that it can announce serious peace negotiations at a NATO summit in May. Successful negotiations would boost the US efforts in Afghanistan as it struggles to contain a resilient insurgency and train a local Afghan army. Now, last month, France, for its part, announced that it would pull out its troops 1 year ahead of the planned NATO withdrawal and proposed handing over full power to Afghan troops by 2013. At present, only half of Afghanistan's population are in areas controlled by Afghan troops, while officials say the most troubled areas remain under the control of international forces. Waheed Omer in Kabul, is the fact that the US is engaging the Taliban in talks now an open acknowledgement that the military campaign has failed?
I think that is linking the peace talks, the so-called peace talks, with American withdrawal or NATO withdrawal from Afghanistan. That's where the assumption that maybe the United States and NATO are trying to strike a face-saving deal with the Taliban at the cost of what we have achieved here in Afghanistan for the past 10 years. That is what makes us wary of the fact of the whole process that has started. Let me make an assumption. Assuming that this is an effort to bring Taliban to bring this insurgency back into Afghan mainstream and having them surrender to the will of the majority of the Afghan people who want to preserve what we have achieved over the 10 years, who don't want any changes in the way Afghanistan and in the Afghanistan's constitution and the way the Afghans have chosen to live in the past 10 years. If that assumption is true, then of course the Afghans support the process. But the assumption that the NATO is trying to strike a deal, no matter at what cost for the Afghan people, in order to make a withdrawal in a way that they want, that's where the problem with the Afghan people start. And I think that is the message that has been conveyed so far. The message so far is that the Americans and the Taliban are meeting, and the Americans and NATO are trying to strike a deal before they leave, which could possibly put the Afghan people and the will of Afghan people at jeopardy and not being taken care of.
Syed Tariq Pirzada in Islamabad, the Taliban has often said publicly that it won't negotiate with Mr. Karzai's government, calling it a puppet regime. Does the fact that they are now talking mean that their position has changed, that they acknowledge his government's legitimacy?
Well, Aiden, you're so right. Look, the Taliban put up a resistance for 10 years to U.S. invasion, U.S. occupation, U.S.-led and NATO-led, occupation and running of Afghanistan. Now, after 10 years, so here the United States does, suddenly discover that, look, we have tried our best. The real Afghan resistance is what the Taliban are right now offering at the present time. Taliban are the strongest group. We have to deal with them. Remember, they were in power from 1996 up to 2001, and Afghanistan had become one of the most peaceful countries in the world. The problem of the West with Afghanistan at that time was the location of that Al-Qaeda had found some refuge over there, and number two, that the Taliban's conservative ideology was certainly not acceptable. But now, as the United States did agree in the end, talking to the Viet Congs and the Vietnamese in Vietnam, the peril is the same. They have found out this is the strongest group. They were in power before the U.S. came. We have to talk. The United States has just appreciated the fact, and I think I admire Washington also for doing that, because after fighting for 10 years, being flexible with the person with whom you have been fighting for 10 years, that's not easy. And I think that is the situation.
We're rapidly running out of time. I'll get a view from London, from Aminullah Habibi in just a moment. But first, I just want to give a right of reply to Waheed Omer, who was shaking his head vigorously there. Very briefly, please, if you can, Omer. 2001, Afghanistan, one of the most peaceful countries in the world. I think that was what you were shaking your head at there.
I know Mr. Pirzada, and I wish he was here living under Taliban for the 5 years that he calls the most peaceful years here in Afghanistan. I don't know what the standard for peace in that discussion would be. And I would strongly disagree that the Americans came to Afghanistan because they disagreed with Taliban's conservative ideology. The Americans came to Afghanistan after they were attacked in their homeland in New York, because Taliban had been ruling us with the help of Pakistan for 5 years, and only those who lived under them know what that situation was. So based on even when you talk to analysts in Pakistan who are supposed to be independent analysts, the kind of perceptions they have about the Taliban in Afghanistan,
I am independent.
I hope so. It just leads us to think that the kind of mindset that exists in Pakistan, even when independent people, is that they want Taliban for us, but they don't want them for themselves. They want everything for themselves, but they want us to live under a peaceful government of their so-called Taliban. That is unacceptable. I don't think there is a way that Afghanistan will go back under the Taliban. That's not an option for the Afghan people.
All right. Aminullah Habibi in London. Let's get back to these talks, which have happened. There was a three-way meeting, possibly here in Doha. What might the Taliban want in terms of confidence-building measures from the US and the Afghan government in order for these talks to progress? Now, could the US and Mr. Karzai actually deliver? I mean, how politically sensitive might be the Taliban's demands?
Well, it depends how, what those demands are. Some of the preconditions that the Taliban put, they already ignored that. For example, withdrawal of the international forces first, and then they will talk. The fact of the matter is that a crack has happened, and there are lots of people inside the Taliban who want to talk. And probably Pakistan has also responded to this pressure to let the Taliban come from Pakistan to Qatar to engage in negotiations. And one more point about the military aspect that you said that previously you asked in your question. The military campaign has also, had its effects since 2009. Before 2009, in fact, there was lots of hopelessness that this war might fail and where the international community might fail in Afghanistan. But since November 2009, 2009, when General Caldwell came and the training of the Afghan National Army and police started, now I think we've seen since 2009 that the majority of those areas who were under the control of the Taliban, like Helmand, for example, or Kandahar, parts of Kandahar, for example, they are not under the control of the Taliban. And partly the effects of this military campaign is that the initiative has taken from the hands of the Taliban, and now they are coming to the negotiating table.
Gentlemen, I'm afraid we are out of time. I have a feeling that we've only just managed to scratch the surface, but thank you to all of you in Kabul, Waheed Omer, in Islamabad, Syed Tariq Pirzada, and in London, Aminullah Habibi. And thank you very much indeed for joining us on this edition of Inside Story. If you want to send us your feedback, please just email your thoughts to us at insidestory@aljazeera.net. Thanks for watching. I'll see you again. Bye for now.